It's there. All you, man.
Oh, we're live. Oh
We're
no.
live.
Yeah, so it's another episode of Manic and Chill. We decided to get real crazy this week and we were like, let's do it 2 weeks in a row on the exact same night at that. So it's almost like we meant to do this.
Yep.
But actually this was sparked up because of the conversation, and I'm not sure if it was in my patron or if it was in your patron, because we're both in those patron group me chats. But the discussion on OBJ, so that kind of prompted me to say, Scott, you want to do some Manic and Chill tonight? And also my co-hosts for the Dynasty Trades HQ podcast bailed on me tonight, and apparently we're doing that Friday. So I was like, all right, I'm going to hit my buddy Scott up because I know he wants to talk. So I guess I should ask how you're doing, right? That's what a good host would do. He'd say, hey, how you doing? How you doing, Scott?
Yeah, that's how we normally start the show, but I kind of like it. You got right into the business, and we didn't need any intros. You can see our Twitter handles are right below our ugly mugs.
Oh, yeah, that's us.
Yeah, to follow those. Hit us up if you have any future ideas or questions. But yeah, I'm doing well. 2 weeks in a row, same time, same day. So that's pretty impressive. Actually, a little bit earlier this week, but still, I mean, a week apart. Maybe we have some consistency going. Do not expect this every week. You never really know, but yeah, I think there's a lot to learn from this week. We kind of talked about last week about how, when's the time to buy, when's the time to sell, how much longer do we wait? Do you give it a couple more weeks? And, then we have this kind of crazy week where, I guess the zero RB truthers maybe got a little bit more justice this week. You had a lot of receivers that were supposed to smash, did smash, but one that didn't was Odell Beckham. He had one target. Got picked off. He tried to make a tackle, tore his ACL, out for the season, and now he is a soon-to-be 28-year-old receiver in a not-so-great situation with a somewhat volatile long-term contract. And now the discussion turns to what is his value, because you weren't necessarily absolutely smashing it if you had Odell on your team, but if you are a contender and you have him, what's the play? That's been the debate today in the chat. So I guess we'll start there. You brought up OBJ, so let's start there. What's your thoughts on his value?
So, every time a player goes down, I love, our instinctive, our instinct is go, it's buy low, it's buy low, it's buy low, it's buy low. Right. Which to me it's kind of funny because it's like a lot of us that play this game think, well, there's a certain level that a player can hit. They won't go any lower than that though, right? Like AJ Green, you were buying him low over the summer, right? Because his value can't drop any. Day Westbrook, maybe a year and a half ago, guys like that. But sometimes there's lower than that. There's the guy's not going to recover. It can't bounce back. And OBJ seems to be that guy to me. We talked about, it's been about a year and a half where he's, for whatever reason, he hasn't performed to the production levels that we're used to. I mean, he was a wide receiver 1, and now he's a wide receiver 3 some weeks not so much. So I just think it's interesting because I do know that a lot of folks are going to just go, all right, well, buy low. All right, well, you're buying low, but like you said, when he comes back, he's 28 years old. He's still on a run-first offense, right? He's on an offense that we've seen does a lot better when they're run first. And for whatever reason, an offense that seems to do better when he's not on the field, which is a little confusing, but whatever. I'm not here to analyze real football. He feels like a guy that if I could get a second-round pick for, I'm pretty much going, yeah, that's fine. Obviously, I'd prefer a player if I'm going for a championship or I think I have a shot. I think I'd trade him straight up for Myles Gaskin if I could. I don't know that I could get Myles Gaskin straight up for him, though. I wonder if I could get Myles Gaskin. I'm going to have to check out. There's got to be a way where you can find out where trades are being made. Oh, my goodness, Dynasty Trade Finder. I'm going to look at these while I hear you say smart stuff about Odell Beckham Jr.
Well, I mean, you kind of started the discussion last year. If everyone remembers, he got traded to the Browns. All the preseason hype for the Browns. Baker Mayfield was up to quarterback 2 after Andrew Luck retired. Just looking at our ADP, Odell was up to basically right after overall 5th player off the board in ADP. He was 5.17 was his highest ADP in the last 3 years. So, I mean, we're talking a first-round startup pick, top half of the first-round startup pick in single quarterback. So that would have been at least equivalent to a first-rounder in a super flex league. So, it was all downhill from there, and it's been downhill ever since then. I think people started to get a glimpse of maybe what Baker Mayfield was, the mess that their offense was last year. And then they hire a new coach, and actually the team has turned it around this year, where I do think the team could make some noise. But now you're sitting in a situation where the offense is, do what you can to win without having to throw it more than 25 times a game. And they have a lot of weapons. I mean, they have Kareem Hunt, they have Austin Hooper, they have Jarvis Landry. They have a couple other tight ends that they showed they can use. I mean, they have guys that where they spread the ball around. It's just hard to project, any conceivable target volume for Odell that separates him from the pack. And we've talked about receivers so many times on my show, on your show, on this show. If you're in that 110 to 130 target range, you're not special. It doesn't matter how good you are. It doesn't matter unless you are literally Tyreek Hill, where you can go for 40 points in the right game script. And even Tyreek Hill, honestly, he's kind of been exposed as being a little bit overrated. The Ravens and the Chiefs have found themselves in a lot of games this year where they just control it with their defense or control it with their game script. They don't need to put up the points that you would expect. And the reason why you're drafting these players in these good offenses, they haven't had to do it. So, I look at a guy like Odell now and say he's hurt. He's not going to play another game until he's 28 and a half years old. And when he comes back, even if he's back on the Browns, what is his ceiling? What's his target ceiling? So, I mean, if we're just having a legitimate value discussion with him, you said a second-round pick. I think if you're a contender, I do think the range of players you would accept for Beckham are a lot higher than your mind can wrap around right now. I saw in one of our chats someone traded him straight up for Preston Williams. Now, that's a big gamble. You're taking a big gamble on Preston Williams. He's probably outside of the, secure dynasty asset range to where, let's say Tua comes in and he doesn't do anything. His value could drop outside of the top 50 receivers too, just because he doesn't have the pedigree. He's not the number one option on his team, and that could be a team that adds somebody else next year and kind of pushes him aside. He could be almost another version of like Michael Gallup, you know what I mean? But without the offense to back the volume that you wanted with Michael Gallup to start the season. But I think that's kind of where we're at. Like if you have, you just go down, if people are listening to this, go pull up the wide receiver ADP on DLF and you're going down to, nobody's going to give you I don't think anybody would even give you like Jarvis Landry for Beckham at this point.
No.
They're basically the same age and you want the one that's playing. I mean, it's that simple. I mean, then you go down a little bit further and you're getting into territory after all of the rookies, after guys like Devontae Parker. Let me ask you a few and just get your gut feeling. Because this guy's had 2 straight great games. And he's still really young, has a good profile. I think people just maybe question, what is his ultimate ceiling? Christian Kirk or Odell Beckham?
I'll take Christian Kirk. I'll take Kirk.
Okay.
Take Kirk.
So Kirk is wide receiver. Yeah, I know. Wide receiver 42 in the latest ADP. So we're already down in that range. If you're going higher and you're in even the Devontae Parker, Jarvis Landry range, like those guys are too productive. They see too many targets.
You're dreaming at this point if you think you're getting Devontae Parker for Odell Beckham Jr. It's just that simple. I mean, there's been like 6 trades since Sunday, and apparently I'm in that league where he was traded for Preston Williams. I'm like, hey, I recognize these team names. I saw here's one and this is a smash accept too. I mean, if someone's willing to give me Brandon Cooks, James Washington, and a 2021 second rounder for Odell Beckham Jr. right now, oh my goodness, that's a smash accept. Antonio Gibson and a bunch of picks for Odell Beckham Jr. I'm smashing accept on that too. It's like you said, he's fallen into that range where he's a guy. He's a guy in his best case scenario. He's Preston Williams, Mike Williams, that whole conglomerate, that whole massive, 25 receivers. Any of them could be a wide receiver one week by accident, but they could also be the wide receiver 46.
Yep.
And, look, 2-3 years ago, I was on the Odell's the most valuable asset in all of Dynasty football. It's not that anymore. So you quickly need to wrap your head around. And I applaud the people that are trading him for guys like James Washington and Brandon Cooks and a second-round pick and an Antonio Gibson, because that's showing, you know what, I'm not stuck on the name cachet. You know, these are teams that clearly looking at the trades, they're going for it. They're like, I have a chance to win this year. I don't think Odell, at least I'm thinking they think Odell's never going to be what he was. So I applaud the teams making those trades. You're going to hurt yourself if you're holding on to this fantasy where Odell Beckham Jr. was being drafted, like you said, as a top 5 pick 2 years ago, 3 years ago. He's not that guy anymore. If the situation changes, sure, he could bounce back, you know, if he ends up in the perfect offense. But apparently little did we know the New York Giants was the perfect offense for him.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, you look at his contract. So he's going to be on the Browns. He's signed through 2023, but he does have a $0 dead cap after next June. So, I mean, I guess the idea would be the sell mark for Odell. If you're a team that's contending and you want a receiver back, we've kind of already talked about the range. I think if you're going to get a receiver for Odell, you're going to have to take some risk back. You're not going to get a guy that's locked and loaded in your lineup. You know, even if it's, you know, I saw somebody ask me earlier today, would you trade Odell for Robbie Anderson? I'm like, oh, yeah, easily. Robbie's younger, on an offense that throws the ball a lot. He's a number one option. Whether you want DJ Moore or Robbie Anderson, whoever the number one is, doesn't really matter. If you look at their targets, they're both going to hit that 120, 140 target range, somewhere in there at the end of the year. So, I mean, yeah, but it's just our minds can't adjust fast enough. You know, if you would have said in July, Robbie Anderson or Odell Beckham, people would have just laughed at you. And we just can't. I mean, yes, he's hurt. But even before the injury, that would have been a closer argument than I think most of our dynasty minds would have been able to fathom. And part of what you're buying, if you are, let's say you want to go the other way and you want to buy Beckham, here's what you're facing. We've already talked about the situation and the contract, right? But let's just assume he's on the Browns next year. He's ready to go at the beginning of the season. You're assuming that, one, he's had no issues off the field with his rehab, with his injury, anything like that. So you're assuming all of that goes good. You're also assuming, probably, at least I am, if I'm buying Beckham, I'm buying now probably on a team where I don't care about the 2020 points. And I'm kind of hoping that it's the same argument we talked about with like Cortland Sutton a month ago. Like, I'm kind of hoping that I have him on my roster and someone else buys the hype next year and his value goes back up. And then I can flip him for a better receiver than I would have flipped him for today. And I have better choices because I don't care about the 2020 points. You know, we did see, Shane, if you remember, after this year's draft, there was a ton of receivers that went, you know, late first to mid second. You can run off the names. There was like 12 receivers that went from like late first all the way to the end of the second round, right? But you remember the ones that got hurt in training camp. You remember like Denzel Mims got hurt. His value went down because you knew he wasn't going to play. He's going to be out for a little while. So you saw some of their values crater a little bit. So I think maybe the move for me would be I'll buy Beckham if I can get some points off my team. And remember what we talked about last week. If you're not contending and you want to get points off your roster, buying a guy like Beckham and trading away points can actually help you a little bit more than what you're getting back. But man, I don't know. I don't know if I want to necessarily hold him into next season and play him because I know what I'm getting. I'm getting just another guy, another wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, matchup dependent week to week. You know, there's going to be weeks where I'm like, oh, he's going up against Baltimore on the road and the, you know, outdoors. I don't really want to play him. I'd rather play, you know, 5 other receivers that are going to be on a team that passes it twice as much. So I'm kind of looking at, I'm just buying him as an investment. Hopefully I can sell him at like 20% more next August when there's some hype, but I'll have to be convicted on what I sell for because I think that's where we're at now.
Yeah, I'm just looking at his stats just this year. I mean, 5 points, 17 points, 9 points, 38 points, 11 points, 4 points, and then obviously, destroyed his knee, so no points.
Right.
That is the definition of a guy. That's the definition of a guy that because of his name, you keep sticking in your lineup. And,
yes,
1, 2, 4 weeks, he basically did nothing to help you. 17 points was great and 38 points was great. But the other 4 weeks, he was actively hurting you because there's someone else you could have stuck in there that would have done better or couldn't have done worse, quite frankly. And their ceiling was probably higher. Tied to that Brown offense, like you said, they don't want to throw the ball 40 times. They've quickly discovered that that's not Baker's strength. Baker's strength is going to be, throwing off of play action, throwing off of after the run game establishes things. If he's playing Dallas, sure, he can tear them up. If he's playing Cincinnati, he can, throw for 1 billion touchdowns. But that's not what they want to do. It hurts my heart because, when Odell went there, I was fired up with Odell Beckham, Jarvis Landry, and Njoku. I thought Baker was just going to be slinging the ball, but that's not what works there. Not when you have Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb coming back. They'd be foolish to move away from that. So I don't see – that's what worries me about Odell is I don't see the bounce back. Because I think because of that year and a half that he's already underperformed, that at this point – that's really going to lessen the bounce back. I don't know that you'll ever be able to get a first rounder for him again, which is just mind boggling to me because again, I'm still young enough to remember when you had to send 3 first round picks to get the guy. These days are gone. I mean, if you can find someone in your league that's willing to give you a first, shoot for the stars, go for it. Not sure why they would do that. But people make bad trades all the time in dynasty football. It's kind of why we have some good teams and some really bad teams. I do have one name though that interested in me thinking about it for you. Cortland Sutton or Odell Beckham Jr.?
Oh, that's easy for me. I think the rebound value on Sutton is going to be a lot higher than Beckham just because there's people that'll still look at Sutton and say, well, he's only 25. He actually will be a free agent after 2021. So there's a chance if you don't like the situation in Denver that maybe it works out somewhere else. But yeah, I think the Sutton has, he went going down at age 24. Yeah, it's a significant injury, but I think a 24-year-old has a lot more elasticity to bounce back from this than somebody that's going to be 28. I mean, I think kind of got in a little debate the other day. Someone said, who's the biggest bust of fantasy football this year? It's more speaking redraft, but you made a great point. And I argue that it was Zach Ertz. And other people were saying, oh, Saquon Barkley, Michael Thomas. And you kind of made the same point with Odell. It's like you probably played Odell for 7 straight weeks because his name was Odell Beckham. You ignored the matchup. You ignored that maybe you had some really great matchup receivers on your bench and you sat them. And then, you wallowed when they scored 21 and Odell scored 7. You're going, well, why did that happen? And it was the same with Ertz. Like you probably thought you were getting that tight end advantage. So you started him every week going, oh, he's going to bounce back and get, his 8 for 60 this week. And you just started him every week. So not only did he cost you probably 4 or 5 losses, but you never really had the ability to give up on that name until he was literally taken away from you because he was injured.
Yeah.
Whereas at least Barkley is like, okay, he's done. He's out. There's nowhere to put him. So yeah, he only cost you like probably 1 week, the week that he went down. So, or maybe the first week and then the week that he went down. So I think that's something that, it's a bigger argument that we could probably do a whole hour show on. But this is wide receivers right now in Dynasty. I mean, every week it's volatile. You know what I mean? Like 2 weeks ago, you could have said, Tyler Lockett's not even worth a first. And then he goes out and literally posts like the second best fantasy football game in the last, 10 years or 11 years or something like that on Sunday. I mean, other than Will Fuller last year, it's the highest scoring game, I think, in the last 5 years. So that's how fast it can change. And I think that's the wide receiver landscape right now. So any final thoughts on Odell or receivers? Because I had another topic I wanted to bring up to you.
No, just, look, keep your head on a swivel, man.
Yeah, exactly.
I mentioned it happens quick. Wide receiver 1 last year, 2 years ago. There's only a few guys that are going to maintain that status.
Yep.
You know.
Next thing I wanted to ask you about, was I ran a couple polls tonight on Twitter, and this is kind of the same debate that we just have been talking about with Beckham a little bit, but it changes more when you get into running backs, especially. But how valuable is a player that you can project to have, even if it's just 15 touches for a week or two? We saw it last week with Boston Scott, Gio Bernard, Jamaal Williams. I mean, I think all three of those guys probably won people weeks last week. And, when they don't have that opportunity in front of them, they're just another guy where it's like you need the right owner. Nobody probably would have given you a nobody would have given you a second rounder for those guys if they don't have the opportunity in front of them. But then all of a sudden, when the opportunity is in front of them, it's like, that's what it would cost to pry him away from me. And it's just like that. The injury can be random, and even can be, quote unquote Jags. I mean, I would say Gio Bernard and Jamaal Williams especially they're just guys. They're situational. That's why they were good plays last week. They may have another week, but I guess my question to you is like, how opportunistic are you on trying to sell those points when there's literally a 48-hour window of, oh, hey, Aaron Jones is out on Saturday. You have basically 36 hours to try to trade Jamaal Williams if you're not using him. And then poof, it could go away this week if Jones comes back. And then he's just another guy. No one wants him. He's just a handcuff at that point. So, I mean, how opportunistic are you on trading those kind of guys? Like, what's your strategy? Because I think it's fascinating just how fast it changes this year. And I bring it up because we're in so many leagues. Every one of my leagues, I'm almost seeing deals like this go down. Like, hey, I need a running back. I'll give you a second.
Yep.
Oh, dude, you just got a second for Boston Scott when I'll just go pick up a guy on waivers that could be the next Boston Scott in 2 weeks. I mean, that literally could happen. So what's your approach?
Yeah, we're in too many leagues. It's just funny though, because Jamaal Williams is like, I love that guy. And I know all the Aaron Jones fans hate him, but like Jamaal Williams, I know for a fact every week he's going to get me at least 7 points. He's just going to get it. That's going to happen.
Yeah.
And there's weeks he's going to get 25 points because for reasons unknown, they're going to use him a ton as a passing weapon. And if Aaron Jones goes out, he's a running back one. You got to see Jamaal Williams. I think you have a little more flexibility with only because of age. So I'm fine with holding on to him instead of just, trading him immediately. A guy like Gio Bernard, any of the leagues I'm in, and I have no shot. 0-6, that like we talked about last week, 1-5, 2-4. I would have been shopping Gio to absolutely everybody in the league, and I would have done exactly what you said, where you see messages now a lot more this year than I ever have on Saturday night, Sunday morning. Someone need a quarterback today, or someone, reaching out to the rest of the league going, anybody want to trade their running back? I need points today. And you're like, yeah. So I'm all for that, in the right roster. Because guys like Gio Bernard, Latavius Murray, Jamaal Williams, Boston Scott, these are all guys that I love having on contending rosters, because I know that if something happens to, Aaron Jones, Jamaal Williams is going to be a running back one. Gio, I'm a little less convicted about because I personally think he's kind of washed, but that's neither here nor there. We're more talking about the player type. On teams that can contend, I'll hold on to them. I'm fine with that. But yeah, you definitely got to take advantage of that window. You should be out there messaging your league if you're 1-5 and you have any of these guys on your roster that, hey, Miles is out again. Hopefully not, but Miles is out this week. Anybody want Boston Scott?
Well, it's almost like, and I did this a dozen times last week. On Saturday night, we got a pretty good handle on what the injuries were going to be like. And, I've set a ton of FFPC lineups already. So I have a pretty good idea of kind of where I'm slotting everybody in, so I can look at a lineup and kind of say, I would start that guy over that guy. And so, I go through and I set enough lineups and I get to some teams and, I don't have them all memorized, but I get to some teams and I go, oh, I have Mike Davis on this team. Oh, I have Gio Bernard on this team. Oh, I have Boston Scott on this team. I have all of them. Then I have to decide, okay, which wide receiver 2 or 3 do I start the running back over? And of course, I don't really want to start one of those running backs over, a receiver that could have much higher upside. So then me as the contender goes, okay, I can set a good lineup and I'll just put, one of these three in the lineup. Let me go out and go to the trade market and try to trade one of the other two. See if I can just get a pick. It's almost like I'm managing it week to week. I go to hit submit on my lineup on Saturday night or Sunday morning, and I go, oh, I'm not starting Boston Scott. Maybe it would make sense to see if someone will give me a pick and another player that I like. Someone might throw me, I don't know, a second rounder and Bryce Love or something like that. And is Bryce Love worth anything? No, but there's a non-zero chance that in 6 weeks he's sitting in the same shoes as Gio Bernard and Jamaal Williams. You never know. But he's a free player. And basically, there's probably somebody in my league out there that's looking for a running back that week. Maybe that'll dry up as the season goes on. And there's other teams that, if I'm 3-10, I'm not going to be like, oh, I want one of these guys for the playoffs because I'm not in the playoffs, or I'm one week away from the playoffs starting and I'm out of it. Why would I do that? But it's just amazing that this year, I go to set some lineups and I'm like, oh, I have like 10% excess. Let's see if anybody wants to buy because I'll take the pick and then I'll worry about buying later. And guess what? I could trade Shane Boston Scott. 2 weeks later, that pick I got, I may need the running back because all mine are injured or on buy. So, hey, who's selling one? So it's almost just like you're playing redraft within Dynasty leagues. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I do. I that is one thing that's been really fun this year is so couple leagues where I thought I was out of it before the season started. Season starts and you're like, oh, my team's actually good. All right, I guess I'm buying now. And there has been a couple leagues too where it's like in week 2, I was like, all right, I'm trash. Let me just start selling stuff off. Your team starts winning. You're like, all right, I got to ride this out. I guess I'm buying stuff back now. In one league, I actually traded away Kyler Murray before the season, and then ended up trading for him 2 weeks ago. So that is fun. But one thing is, it's a good position to be in if you have all those guys on your roster as far as trade assets, but you definitely do need to trade some of them at that point. Cause I am in the same boat where it was, am I starting am I starting Boston Scott, or am I starting Jamaal Williams, or am I starting Justin Jackson? I don't know. And guess what? No one does. Trade one of them. So, at least the decision's out of my hands at that point, and I got something to value out of them.
Yeah, and you do have to kind of settle in with your teams that are good. Like you don't want to have to rely on getting these deals every single week. At some point, the later we get into the season, and if you think back to the episode we talked about last week, still there's a lot of teams that I've seen that haven't fully committed to one direction or the other. They're still maybe waiting a couple more weeks, getting through a couple injuries. There's a lot of marquee teams that are on bye in the next 3 weeks. And so you're probably having some teams that are waiting to see where they stand, coming out of those bye weeks. But I think by time we get to Thanksgiving, which I think is maybe week 13 this year, or week 12, I believe. By the time we get to Thanksgiving, I think we're probably going to have a lot of the leagues are going to be haves and have-nots. So you're not going to have as much competition week to week to buy these guys. You're going to have maybe one or two other teams. And here's the other thing is, you get to Sunday and it's easier in shallower leagues too, but you get to Sunday and not everybody even needs an extra player to start, right? Like I go to submit my lineup. If I'm good, if I like my lineup, I'm not going to go out there and make a trade for a player because I'm not trading for any of these players because of their talent. Another thing that we've seen this year in Dynasty is like I would say 90 to 95% of our players are replaceable. There's very few players where I'm buying and I'm like, dude, I love that player so much, not only for this week, but the rest of the season and his career trajectory for the next 3 or 5 years. Like, I don't think I've made one deal unless it's a quarterback where I've looked at that type of scope. Everything else is like, dude, is this going to get me through like the next 3 weeks and help me win? And then I'll worry about it later. So, that's pretty much what this year has been with all the volatility, and I don't see it stopping anytime soon. And what do you think it's going to do in the offseason? Because we're going to hit that point where season's over. Now we're trying to assess the value of not only, all the guys that we're typically trying to value about what they did in their rookie year, who goes up, who goes down, who are the buy lows, who are the guys to sell. But then we have this crazy season where can we even trust how teams use their players? Can we even trust, the moves that some of these organizations made, because their hands were forced in a lot of ways. Some of their same strategies may not be the same going forward because of this crazy year. So, I mean, is this going to just continue in the NFL? Is this just what the NFL is just so many moving parts?
Yeah. I mean, look, as much as I love, we talk about this, Michael Sipes will make fun of me, my co-host, all the time, because I'm always like, it's black and white, because that's easy. I like that. I like when, if this, then that. There's less of that, though. Partially because teams are ready to move on from quarterbacks sooner. Teams are ready to build teams differently than what we perceive is the correct way. Teams apparently are ready to move on from coaches sooner. Well, at least good organizations, not so much like, let's say the Lions. But yeah, and it definitely does feel like it's more volatile. I mean, you look at Juju Smith-Schuster, for example. It's a guy that 2 years ago, and we've talked about this before, his trajectory, you're like, he's going to be the overall wide receiver 1. Now what? He's the wide receiver 4. I don't even know, because he hasn't had any weeks that made me even bother to look up his stats. I think he's a wide receiver 4 or so. It's really hard to decide what's signal and what's noise.
That's a good way to put it.
And it's just, you're going to have to get used to being able to pivot quickly. Because if you stay on a stance, if you stay with the belief, and, I'm not saying Juju won't bounce back, but if you stick on that stance, if you stayed on that stance that Juju is going to be a wide receiver 1 when, Ben comes back, well, you're just out of luck this year when he's getting out targeted by Deontay Johnson. And if Deontay Johnson isn't there, he's getting out targeted by Chase Claypool. So it's one of those things where it's the nature of the game. For whatever reason, it's more volatile than I ever remember. And, I've only been playing, I'll say 6 years about that, but it's still night and day from what it was when I first started playing. So, that old phrase people used to talk about, take lock. You can't have that. I'm not saying you can't have convictions and you can't have, you should have reasons for the things that you're doing and sound reasoning, but you have to be ready to move off of it when it looks like that sound reasoning doesn't matter.
Yeah, and I mean, you make a great point that you have to be able to adjust quickly. I mean, you have to adjust week to week, game by game. And I'll laugh sometimes, and I'm not going to name any names specifically, but I'll read articles from, some other websites, and it'll be like, who are your dynasty buy lows, or who are your sell highs? And, you read through some of those and you're like, they're just not in line with reality of what's going on there in a lot of other leagues. It's like buy low on this player. Well, I'll tell you what, if the buy low includes that player doing anything in the last 2 weeks, there's no such thing as a buy low. You have to almost look at a situation and say, a perfect one to bring up is Chase Edmonds. I ran a poll today. Is it Chase Edmonds or Kenyon Drake? And he just blows Kenyon Drake out of the water. Now, 2 weeks ago, most people probably still would have taken Kenyon Drake straight up. There would have been no incentive to make that move. But boom, one injury and it completely switches. But now if you read articles this week, and I'm sure you're going to, buy Kenyon Drake or buy Chase Edmonds low. Well, there's no such thing. There's no such thing. If you're waiting to act till now, it's too late. You're probably getting a negative EV on your trade if you're buying Chase Edmonds this week. You just are. Unless you're finding an owner that for some reason just doesn't believe in him. And that would take a convicted owner on the other side to be like Kenyon Drake, or keep saying Kenyon Drake, but Chase Edmonds is trash. He's never going to be anything. I'll sell him now. This is my window, right? This is my 2 week window to sell him. That's the only way you're quote unquote buying low on him. Otherwise, you're almost better off looking at the situation, right? Like Shane, look at just what happened with Arizona's running backs, right? What's the next one? And buy low on that player.
Oh, it's Eno.
Well, but not even Arizona.
I know. I get you.
I'll just pose it out there. What's the next one? What's the next Arizona? Target that player. Now, you're trying to predict an injury, which is hard to do, but it makes sense from a process standpoint to take 3 shots on buying one of those guys instead of waiting for the break to happen and then buying for, I'm not selling Chase Edmonds for less than a first. But is anyone buying for a first before they've really seen it? They've seen him be the bell cow back for 1 game. And that was last year, and he blew his hamstring.
Right.
So, I mean, there really isn't incentive for somebody to pay it. So the market is basically at a point now where the sellers won't sell because the price has gone way up from what it was 2 weeks ago. But nobody's convicted enough to buy it because they haven't seen anything. So there really is no trade market for him unless you find the two perfect owners. So I'll pose this to you. What's the next Chase Edmonds, Kenyon Drake situation?
Oh, man.
That you would pay like a third and a throw-in player now just to get on your roster.
Oh, man. Who's behind David Montgomery? Jesus. Not Cordell
Artavis
Patterson.
Pierce.
Artavis Pierce. Oh, I could get him for a fourth.
Lamar Miller.
I'm not going to pay anything for Lamar Miller, sir.
He's on waivers.
Maybe Artavius Pierce because David Montgomery is bad. I'd look at look, if you're going to go through the teams, look at the usage and who's bad. I mean, because if you did that with Kenyon Drake and Chase Edmonds, you could have just seen that Kenyon Drake was bad and Chase Edmonds was better on a per touch basis, on a per opportunity basis. Do that with every running back room. I mean, obviously there's certain running back rooms you don't have to do that with. You're not doing that in Philadelphia. You're not doing that in Green Bay, obviously. But Tony Pollard, maybe. Although he hasn't, he hasn't looked super in the small opportunities that he was given or the extra opportunities he was given over the last 2 weeks. But something like that, you got to look at a running back that's struggling. That obviously, and just see if the guy behind him is getting the touches. And remember, it's not always the guy directly behind him. Sometimes it's the guy behind him.
Well, and it's hard to find too, because you mentioned Tony Pollard. The problem is no one really probably has a convicted stance enough on Tony Pollard to say, even if Tony Pollard were to be the guy tomorrow, even if it's short term, it's really not a coveted situation. So it's really hard for you to be convicted enough to say, I'm going to go pay for a guy like Tony Pollard. While we're doing this discussion, I'm kind of buzzing through all the teams trying to think of an example, and it's hard to find. It really is hard to find a situation where, you look at the backfield and you say, that's one where A, I like the backfield, but B, it's ambiguous enough where I like the player behind the starter or behind the backup enough to go out and actually give up a draft pick and take the risk. Because if there's no injury, you could get stuck on basically just holding a player for no reason. You basically just give up a pick for nothing and it ends up being worthless. I mean, could you see one from, I don't know if this guy, the problem is this guy doesn't really have the pedigree, but could you see Anthony Mcfarlane being one? I think that's one that really stands out.
He's still a guy that, I have rostered everywhere, and he's a guy that, because if Connor goes down, although unfortunately they started trusting Snell again because he had a touchdown past week. And I completely just blanked out on the other team I was thinking about. But Anthony McFarlane's a guy that I'm still buying on, and you don't have to pay anything for. Really, he's a throw-in. But he's a guy that if he gets behind that Pittsburgh line and he ever gets 10 carries, he's going to break through for 60 yards. That's probably the best. I don't want to say buy low. God, I hate that term. But, he's one of those guys that you can acquire cheaply right now and just, I don't want to say hope for injury, but if something were to happen, then at least you have him on your roster and you're not chasing him, after, like now with Chase Edmonds, where you're trying to chase. And like you said, you're in that zone where I don't want to pay a first, but no one's going to take less than a first for him.
Yeah, I mean, it's varying prices too. The problem is with somebody like McFarlane, like if I know you have a ton of McFarland, I have a ton of McFarland. I mean, he was one of my higher drafted rookies, and I've just been sitting on him. But if someone came to me and said, hey, I'll give you a random 2021 third, and it looks like that team is a, fifth place or something like that. Like that's, to me, the process that we're describing makes me less apt to trade him away from that, unless it's just a team where I have so many options. If I have 5 McFarlane situations, which I don't even think there are 5 in the league, but if I had 5 of them, I may be apt just to cash out there. But, I don't really have the incentive to ever cash out on these types of players until the situation flips, right? And then the price goes up. That's when I want to sell. So, I mean, it's really hard for you to go out. If the cut line is like a second or a third round pick, I'm not throwing away my seconds I'm not paying a second for Anthony McFarland, but I'm not selling for a third. So what's the what is the deal?
Right. You're not getting, the only way you're getting guys like that is they just have to be part of a larger package where
correct.
no one thinks about it and no one cares. I mean, honestly, I just scanned through every NFL team just to jog my memory. Nothing. It's a veritable wasteland out there. I mean, there's obviously, I would think anyone watching this that reads DLF would know about guys like Hasty. You obviously already know about Eno Benjamin. Only guy I can think of at this point, and he still needs 2 more injuries or at least 1 more injury before he even gets any run, would be Justice Hill, who I don't even know if he's been active yet this year, to be quite honest with you. Running behind Ingram, Gus Edwards, and J.K. Dobbins. I mean, from a talent profile, I guess that's the only other guy. Look, there's Wayne Gallman, right? But everybody knows that. You look at the Los Angeles, the Chargers backfield. I mean, obviously we're seeing those guys play out. We were hoping that the Saints might be able to use some Ty Montgomery, but he's on the COVID list. A lot of these backfields are just kind of settled. I don't know that I remember it ever being this settled. What are you going to say? LaMichael Pirine? Everybody knows about him. There's no hidden guys. So basically, you just got to check the waivers and see if any of these guys are sitting out there and you have the roster spot, really.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple. I mean, we talked about him a couple weeks ago, but I still think Rashad Penny fits in this mold where I would pay a third for him. The problem is, as it gets closer to him potentially coming back, and he may not come back, we don't know. But I mean, every running back on Seattle, even DJ Dallas, is hurt this week. And so, that has kind of opened people's eyes. I was listening to another podcast, not DLF, but they were talking about Rashad Penny, like, make sure you get him on the back of your roster. And I'm sitting there going, well, if he's on the back of my roster in Dynasty, I'm not selling him for a third. I've built my team in a way where there's just not the incentive. I'd rather wait for, I'd rather hold 6 of those and wait for 1 or 2 of them to break during the season and then try to get the second rather than sell for the third. One I can think of that's kind of a little bit out there, but really has been forgotten. What about Divine Azigbo?
Yeah, I did think about him. He's a guy that if Robinson were to go down, right?
Robinson went down tomorrow, and it's not a great situation. It's an offense I don't think really anybody wants to invest in. But you never know. They could at least run out the rest of the season and right. Treat. I could see them, whoever the back is, as long as they have the prerequisite size, I can see them just throwing them in and doing the exact same thing they're doing with Robinson with whoever the guy is. At week to week, it could be a different one. It's not going to be Chris Thompson, but it could be anybody else.
Yeah, and that's the problem is Chris Thompson looked terrible in that role.
Right, and we know he can't handle that role. So I'm just thinking, if Robinson went down tomorrow, I could see him just throwing his Igbo in there for like 2 weeks and being like, hey, let's see if you can be James Robinson. And then what if he is? Then what? What's the difference between the two? I don't know.
We loved him last year, right? He was, I mean, he's a guy that everybody loved more than James Robinson this year before the preseason. He's a guy that everybody talked up. So, yeah, he's one of the few guys that if he's sitting out there on your waiver wire, it's worth picking up. Because, looking at the backfields, there's, maybe it's the leagues we're in. I don't know. I'm searching the waiver wires every week, but a lot of these running backs are already rostered. But again, that's different types of leagues. You got to make sure that you're checking your own rosters because for example, I would have assumed Wayne Gallman was rostered in every league, but I realized doing waivers last night that he wasn't. So, threw a couple bucks on him and we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes we're easy to dismiss these guys if they get bumped down the depth chart, or if they get pushed to a practice squad or they get cut and they go somewhere else. I think we can probably give up on the Alex Collinses and those types that have been out of the league or bounced around. But some of these guys that move from, third string to a practice squad and then they get elevated for a couple weeks and then they go back down. Like sometimes it just takes that right break. And then you have a very short window to capitalize. You go out there, you have the one shot to get, 12 carries in a week just because so much of attrition in a backfield. And then you go out and you fumble or you look terrible, you may never get a shot again. So it's like that. But I think the idea and the exercise is every week, check your waiver wire. If you have extra spots, I'm either adding just real quick on my process, and then I want to get your thoughts and we'll end the show. Every week on my waiver wire, I'm looking for potential guys that I could start, right? Like maybe I have a pinch. Like last week I had to start Tyler Croft or James O'Shaughnessy, and I had to pick. And, I had 3 tight ends that I would have never thought it would have come to that. But I had a league where I had Andrews, Ertz, and Goddard. Did I ever think I'd start Tyler Croft? No. But it came to that. He was sitting on waivers. So that's the first thing. Like, do I literally need a player? Braxton Berrios, I added him in a league last week and started him because Crowder was out. Like that's getting really, really desperate when you're having to pick guys up to start. So most of the waiver wire diving is like, okay, it's either, is there a backup quarterback that could maybe be intriguing and be worth something if there was an injury? That's the first thing for me. Then the second thing is there a running back that is literally going to be active on game day that I can add to my team? Because if so, a month ago you could have added Jeffrey Wilson in every league, and the dude goes out and he's had 2, top 24 weeks already. Now, is he ever going to do one again? Is Jeffrey Wilson worth anything right now, Shane? No, you couldn't even get a third for him because he's hurt. And he's on a backfield where there could be 4 dudes ahead of him after this week. But the point is, every week you can add those kind of guys. So I go through. I add constantly. I'll add a Justice Hill here. I'll add a Quadri Allison here. Just extra spot. Why not? Why not add an extra player? It's a 0.5% chance that the backfield might break your way, but if it does, you never know. You may have a guy that's worth a third or even a second in the future. So it's just more of a process thing. Any thoughts?
No, just, look, your thoughts on that are perfect. Mine is just, that shows why you have to keep working the waiver wire. These names are disgusting. You know what I mean? They just are. Every week I'm going through and I'm like, these guys are terrible. I want no parts of any of these players. But I know that they're going to have some value at some point, hopefully, or they could have some value.
Yeah.
And that's all it takes. Like I said, 3 times this year I've picked up quarterbacks off the waiver wire that I know aren't good, but it doesn't matter because someone's going to need a quarterback to start one week, and they're going to go, I will give you a third for him, and I'll go, all right. So every week, that's, just remind yourself, I'm doing this for a reason. I'm doing this for a reason, Yep. Trust me, it is disgusting. It's like, oh, really? I got to go pick up Alex Ingold? Hey, you never know. You honestly never know what's going to happen. You got the open roster spot, then go use it.
Yeah, there's a league where I think every single week for the last 5 weeks, I've had it's one of those where you can put players that are ruled out for the week on your IR. So you get like an extra couple spots at the end of the week when they do the inactives. Every week, someone actually joked in the chat. They go, this is the 5th straight week you've added Chad Henne and then dropped him. And I'm like, yeah, the Chiefs backup could have some value if Mahomes gets hurt. So I'm going to add Chad Henne every week. I've added Chase Daniel a couple times because I'm like, well, Stafford has a propensity to get hurt sometimes. So, it's just those 1% advantage moves where you could easily just ignore that spot, let it go. The player locks. You don't use the extra roster spot, but you never know it can turn into a little bit of value. So I know we've kind of gone off tangent, but this is the degenerate part of this show where we're like people are probably sitting there going like, they either understand it or they're going, what are you guys talking about? Adding Chad Henne and Divine Ezigbo and Quadri Allison and, Ali Ingold and Keith Smith.
Wait,
Keith
Brian
Smith,
Hill?
fullback?
Pick up Brian Hill again? All right.
I'm just
going to wrap the show up as the host this week.
Yeah, wrap it.
You can find Scott at Charles Chill FFB. Me at Shane is the worst. Yeah, we're both on the Twitter. Dynasty and Chill. Chasing the Helmet for Scott. Both of his podcasts. 2 of his podcasts. I think that's all of them. Yeah, and then Mio, I'm on this and the Dynasty Trades HQ podcast. Make sure you subscribe to this channel and you tell DLF that you love us. We're the best YouTube show they have because I don't know what'll happen. But if you do it, that'd be great. That's all. Yeah, that's all I got.
If you're listening to the audio and you're not doing the closed captioning, you'll hear little noises and bells during the video. And just hit the button. When you hear the bell, hit the button, subscribe to the channel, like the video. I have no idea how the YouTube likes and algorithms work, but I assume the more likes we get, the more views. Then
I think it's good. Yeah.
yeah, I think it's good. It shares the video with other people, and then it spreads things for DLF. So,
and look, and if you, say you got your kids this weekend and you got something to do, and just sit them down in front of the computer, let them watch this, and we'll entertain them, and then you go about your business.
Yeah, maybe they'll want to join a Dynasty league.
There you go.
Shane, your kids into Dynasty yet?
No, they hate football. So there's
Perfect.
that. Yeah.
Perfect. Well, with that, we'll sign off. Maybe we'll keep this like a regular thing. Next Tuesday, penciled in on my calendar to Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, whatever. We'll try to get you an episode every week. Reach out to us if you want anything specific to be talked about. Catch you later, DLF.
Bye.